Welcome back to part 2 of Myths and Facts, PCI DSS and Who is in Scope, featuring Kieran Nalton, Head of PCI Services at LRQA. If you missed part 1, you can catch it on YouTube, Spotify or Apple Music.
So, not just annually, quarterly, monthly, weekly, do you set, when you're working with an entity, do you give them a guidance on what they should do post your compliance, how often they should be checking things and doing things? Is that part of your remit?
Well, within the standard, there's certain things that are prescriptive, and some time-bound, obviously, requirements. So it might, but these are a minimum anyway. So, for example, you might have to have quarterly ASV scans.
Yeah.
But we see a number of clients who they do regular testing, because if you obviously find something and you left it that 3 months, a full 3 months, and you find something, you're not going to get a passing scanning time by the chance you've had some chance to do your fact finding, then to determine whether it is an actual finding or whether it's a false positive.
Yeah.
You've then got to potentially do development testing and then pushing it out. Like if you've pushed it right to the limit of that 3 months, you're going to miss it. So we often see clients now doing a mix of either self-testing using an actual ASV tester, potentially monthly scanning. But what I would say is it's all on the rate of change. If you've got a fairly static environment, you wouldn't expect to see much between scans unless potentially there's new vulnerabilities that obviously come out. But if you're doing tons and tons of change, your testing should reflect that.
Much more regularly.
But that goes for anything. If you're doing regular firewall changes, you want to be doing regular testing, or what we call in PCI terms, any significant changes. So if there's any significant changes, whatever testing requirements are in scope normally, do them again. And that's when the contentious points can come in, because you can get an entity that might not have much budget, so they might try and line up their testing activities when they know they're going to have a significant change, so that it can all sort of feed into it, like penetration tests, for example.
Yeah.
Because they might not have the budget to do 2 or 3 pen tests a year. So again, but that comes down to good planning, good management, good understanding of what's in scopes, and then you can then tie it into other initiatives.
Okay. And have you seen, version 4, obviously been out, nearly 2 years now? Much change with merchants and third parties with that strengthening? I see you smiling, so no.
In other words, there has been some.
Is it doing its job, I suppose? Is it making people more aware? Is it making people be more observant of what they're doing? Is it helping?
So straight as it depends, classic QSA answer, but it depends on what the entity is doing.
Right.
So if it's a merchant, so straight away, SACE typically, I know you operate like the DTMF space and helping clients potentially align to SACE, but in terms of online payments, ASV scanning is a massive one. So now you get in small merchants who potentially didn't have any testing requirements for ASV previously, and they may have just done it as a good initiative, good practice. They're now got to incorporate regular testing, so their entire business processes potentially could have been changed.
So who's telling them though? Who's there's a lot of changes in there. I mean, there was a lot of mandated from best practices flipped to mandated this year. But who's talking about it? Who's the people actually saying, are you aware of this?
The council are doing quite a good job to promote this, in all fairness, with they push out, the PCI DSS. I mean, typically with our clients, we engage with them all at the time when we were moving from version 3.2.1 to version 4.
Yeah.
So QSAs are a good start point to work with the clients and identify that. But actually, we're way past that time now of it like being future dated requirements. Now it is just the standard as of April.
Yes.
So typically anyway, for those small merchants, it's that mindset of regular testing. They may need to spin up resource to do changes in that BAU activity. Equally with e-skimming requirements. So the potential implications of scripts on payment pages, that's a new one as well. But again, outside of the remit for like yourselves, but it's
well,
another...
we have a hosted web, we have our ClickSpace solution, it fits us as well,
Yeah.
so we're very conscious. And that it's weird, e-com and the threats to e-com is so loud. You know, over the phone payments it's not really spoken about, it's not as prevalent, they don't have as much. We have, you know, deep fake attacks, and as we mentioned, not to mention any names, those poor retailers who have been battered and harangued with their massive attacks that they've had. It makes sense that everyone's panicked. You know, when we send out a hyperlink for a payment, we don't do anything in our own name. Everything's branded as a client, URL's a client, phone number's a client. We do everything in our power to try and give that merchant's customers peace of mind.
Yeah.
But even then, they'll report that somebody gets the link and rings to say, I've got this link, is it okay, should I be using this link? There's a panic. So in that space, it gets shouted about, but I'm not so sure it does over the phone. You know, it's a less verbalised problem, I suppose.
I think it's just what your business does. Now, there's certain customers where that speed and efficiency of sending out a payment link might work for customers because they can actually pick it up later on, or if they've got a wallet on the phone, they can just do it there and then. Exactly.
So
but there's also what's your core business? Do you need to interact with customers? Who's your demographic? Because you may get a certain demographic of customers that prefer to actually speak to somebody.
Yeah,
and
thankfully,
having that,
we'd be in trouble if we didn't.
Oh yeah, I mean, as long as you're not on kind of hold with annoying music for 20-30 minutes, you're all right. But a big fear for a lot of companies is like basket abandonment, and that's why Agent Assist is really good, because you still get that business element where they can still keep to the core values, they can still help the customer, they can still interact with them, but the customer can make a payment securely.
Yeah.
And so there we go, back to business levers again, and solving business problems.
It always amazed me when I got into this. You know, initially when I joined, everything was around, you know, debt, car parking, PCNs, all that kind of stuff, as you would expect.
Yeah.
But when we moved into manufacturers and retailers, it was astonishing. You know, that we have some huge global retailers who still have that 6 to 15% of their customers who just won't pay on don't want to go to the shop, won't pay online, still needs to be on the phone, and brands that you just wouldn't expect, where they have a core contact center element who are constantly helping those clients get through those shopping baskets. And it became even more prevalent when obviously 3DS2 was mandated, because before that there were a lot of help because they were logging into their own websites as the customer, taking the card data and completing the customer's order in what would be a client-facing website.
Yeah.
It's nearly 3 years since that changed, but that was dramatic for us, because all of a sudden all of those companies, they seem to be hidden, and then bang, all of a sudden they can't take e-commerce payments in the way they were because it's gone 3DS, and now they need MOSO solutions. But they were already doing it. You know, they were already taking card data, but they weren't the sort of people that would come to us. They've been forced into that path now, have been observed to take card data.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully it's a good thing, but also for their own benefits, because what protections would they've had in place for chargebacks there? How would they approve them?
Chargeback. I mean, for us, chargebacks on over the phone is a pain anyway, because obviously it's there are certain sectors that we work in that, shall we say, social media is very good at telling everybody how to get out of what they've just paid in certain areas of collections of payment. So for us, we launched this year. We were the first to launch this. We now have 3DS2 agent payments, 3DS2 IVR payments, because while you still want to maintain that, because like you said before about understanding what the business needs, we need to be also risk averse for their chargebacks. You know, the fines for chargebacks are incredible, and so in that space. But that's then using both sides of the technology. You know, you're still keeping the agent away from the data.
Yeah.
You're still giving them enough of a view of a redacted process so that they know it's been done, but no risk, and then no chargeback either. So it is possible, but it's constantly changing, which I suppose is why Chris and our team are constantly checking on our compliance, because it's every 2 weeks there's something being done. With us, it seems to never end. And if it's not PCI, it's ISO, and if it's not ISO, it's SOC, and if it's not SOC, it's cyber security, and if it's one after another. But it's a full-time business for them. You know, it's quite a. But our customers expect it. We don't have a choice really. You know, if you think about it, the customers still technically have a choice, because unless a requirer is going to pull the plug, they're going to carry on transacting in whatever way they seem fit, because unless the acquirer is going to take responsibility and stop them, nobody else is going to. Because I mean, people who come to you. You're not out as a business trying to find people who are doing things wrong to help them.
No,
you're waiting for people to want help.
And that's it. We're going into an assessment with an open mind, but equally, it seems unlikely that somebody would have asked you to come and do an assessment if they thought they weren't compliant.
You would think.
No, it is possible now and again that you may get an entity that is not compliant, and they might be missing a couple of requirements, and the requirer said, well, we'd rather have the paperwork even if it's a not compliant outcome.
Yeah.
Like, right, okay.
Because at least they know what the risk is.
Yeah, but they're wanting a blue moon, to be honest, because it is quite binary with the acquirers reporting up. So whilst you can have compliant payment channels, until you are completely compliant, for them it's a yes or a no.
But that's like you were saying before, though, isn't it? If they have, you know, the lion's share is they run a process that's very small.
Yeah.
It's not financially viable to do that any other way than the way it's being done. Yeah. As long as they know how they're doing it as compliantly as possible. It's documented, the process is there, it's checked, it's audited, and the acquirer's aware of it. That's a scenario where you're saying they will sign that off as it's such a small. It's
still technically not compliant, but it's whether that acquirer is happy with the risk. Now, there's often different dispensations that the acquirers can have. Like, for example, you may get something. You may get a payment device that's end-to-end encrypted rather than point-to-point encrypted.
Right.
But they may still allow the entity to use SAC P2PE, for example, because they've got all the information, they've got all the context, they understand what the technology is because they've had that dialogue. And
so is that more of a legacy system they've kept?
Yeah, or potentially just it may be that they procured something and actually it's not what they realised, and they may need a couple of years of doing that, or 12 months before they can switch out. 'Cause it depends on the size of the estate as well. They may, if you've got a few thousand devices or tens of thousands of devices, you're not going to change them out overnight.
So it's still pretty fair in that circumstance. It's not draconian. They will work with you to achieve the goal as long as you've got a goal.
Ultimately, I think they just want to be informed, like everybody. I think in a sense that the merchant is the customer of the service provider, but equally, kind of like the acquirer is sort of the same from the merchant. They're like, right, where's my AOC? Like, I want to be informed. I want to know your timelines. I want to know your target dates. If you're not going to be compliant, tell us when you are going to be.
Yeah. And
it's that open dialogue. And equally, from a merchant would want that from a service provider. You're bringing out a new product line or something. When's it going to be compliant? When's your next assessment? Can I have my AOC?
Yeah, I mean, haven't for a while, but I remember in the early days of doing the contact centre piece, we came across a few where, you know, we began the process, we'd done the scope, the project had begun and they were coming for compliance, and as you've said, the acquirer accepted that as an in-process change, and they allowed it. Obviously they had to reassess when it was finished because it was a fundamental change to what they were doing, so you kind of get it. And I know we're always conscious of that if we're doing something new, because it's quite a heavy process, as you know, to go through our compliance. If we're going to do a major change, to try and make sure that operations are actually aligned with compliance, because that's really annoying if you're 2 months in and you've done something that's so fundamentally different. We did it, for instance, we've always been our own tin for the entirety of the business, but due to some of our US operations and needing to be cloud-based, we had to go into Azure, but we held back 9 months because we were 3 months into just being assessed. And it's like, well, okay, it's something we should do, but that's a complete redo of what we've done. So we built, prepped, ready, and then went at the time just to be more economical with time, because physicality of it, how the time it takes to maintain and to just do it again. Those people have moved on to ISO or something else, or
but that's another thing as well. Like, whilst we're not auditors in an assessment, when you've got multiple compliance streams, you can get audit fatigue as well. Otherwise, it's like, right, back on the carousel, let's go again. So like that sort of planning and preparation, it's like we can have this environment that's not turned on, it's ready to go, we understand the requirements, and then right when we're ready, bang, let's go.
I mean, even for us, I mean, we've changed as a business in the 11 years I've been here, but we've got like 5 or 6 people in security now. It's gone crazy. As we've gone global, with the extras, the socks and the HIPAAs and stuff like that, having to jump through what are essentially very similar loops with slightly different wording and a different requirement. But yeah, it is beyond full time now, and I understandably, it's what we do, so you kind of expect it. But we're coming across more clients now in that situation where they've got 2 and 3 people in compliance, and it's an expensive process. It's not easy to do. Okay, so look, we're going to give them some help. I think we haven't talked about it on this, but we ourselves spoke about you as a business and the fact that it isn't just about the assessment, it's about the consultancy piece. So any of our customers who are watching this, please speak to us. Kieran and the guys are there to help. It isn't there to cause you a problem. If there's advice or support, consultancy is available. You need to get deeper inside your QSA's business. You need to understand what they're capable of. It isn't just for a certificate once a year. Take advantage of it, because if you try and hire the kind of honours that you guys have to have, if you take that on as an employee, there aren't many of our customers who employ a QSA internally. They'll have internal assessors. Potentially is kind of what the highest I would normally see. And even then, not very often, maybe a PCIP like myself, but even it's people who are working in that area. But if there's guys like you out there who can come in and support and then help them make a plan of how to achieve it, that's probably
100%, absolutely. And the thing is, early intervention, the earliest intervention that we can possibly have, the better.
Sorry, so just to pick back up, from a customer's perspective, rather than just seeing you as a QSA to come in to do a certification, they should really be trying to take advantage of the consultative approach from you. But how would they engage with that? What do they need to do, and how would that sort of get costed out normally if somebody wants help in planning, and what sort of areas do you guys help with?
So in terms of like costings and things, it generally depends on what type of level of service like they're wanting as well. So it could be anything from a small consultancy piece, so we just want some time on a call,
right,
just like do a bit of a workshop and give us a bit of a write-up.
Yeah.
It could be anything from a day.
Oh, okay.
But then
so not a huge investment.
No, and it just depends on the level. Whereas we've supported RFP processes previously, where, for example, a client wanted to implement a new solution, and it wasn't just something that was available off the shelf. They were bringing in potential providers to develop that solution, and as part of their tendering process, we were subject to their scoring criteria, along with other external SMEs who operated in different fields. So we were doing it from a PCI angle, and we looked at the solution itself. Does this fit the criteria PCI wise? Does it also, on their scoring system, does it demonstrate business value? And ultimately, the credibility of what's actually written down. So we were provided these scorings to go through the tendering process. For other clients, we've been involved in contract negotiations.
So it's on the RFP. Yeah. So when the RFPs were filled in, you would also help them review the submissions as well, as to what the people were saying about how they deal with that compliance.
Yeah, so the initial stage was just like the submissions.
Yeah.
Second stage of the process was actually any questions that we raised or points that got to come back then and answer them, etc., and do additional presentations. And then obviously, lastly, go off to selection, and that's when kind of the compliance aspects are a certain part of it, but obviously cost element, all these things considered made up the overall score. So interesting.
It's a different perspective. I wouldn't have thought that would have been an area that you guys would do.
Yeah, I think it's just again business need. Like this is what we need, so we can come in and support them. In terms of other clients, they might have a contract negotiation and say, does this stand up to scrutiny in terms of are we potentially covered by this verbiage in here? And we might say, well, look, personally, I don't work in the legal remit, but actually that passes the sniff test or not, because for service providers under requirement 12.9, they've got to provide written acknowledgement to their customers that they are responsible for PCI DSS compliance.
Yes.
So
something we now get asked for.
Yeah.
So people are reading it. People must be taking note, because we do get asked for that now.
Yeah.
Whereas we didn't before.
So for the merchant, it'll come as part of 12.8, but obviously for the service provider, it's there to say, actually, you need to do this. And traditionally, this is one area where as QSAs we bang our heads and say, whoever was assessing that entity, why they're not providing something that's a little bit clearer, because you can get some wishy-washy contract that says one-liner, yeah, we do compliance, and
it's not good, is it?
Absolutely, and that's it's always that, because you feel like sort of clutching at straws a little bit here and trying to make it work, whereas there are service providers that go, actually, we're responsible for this. We understand that we can have the potential to impact your security, etc. Here's a responsibility matrix that we're done, and you're like, when that comes across, you're like, oh God, that's nice and easy.
Do you know what it is though? We do that, and I think when we first met, I mentioned to you that sometimes I have to hold myself back, because we tell them everything we're responsible for. We always inform them where we could affect the security, where we improve it, almost what they should be aware of themselves and what they should be asking their third parties. But from a sales perspective, it can cause me a problem. You know, when you do that with a business who wasn't looking for that level of detail, who weren't asking the right questions, that can of worms can be quite horrendous, but it's still the right thing to do.
Yeah.
It should be. They should want that. They should be asking for it. They're starting to. There are more people who ask now, but historically they wouldn't. You know, it would be, give us your AOC, great, I'm compliant. You know, as we said at the beginning, that the misunderstanding that by buying a compliant product, I'm compliant, and the fact that, you know, our AOC covers our product. You know, as a business, how we operate that product is within that AOC and the ROC.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that how our accounts department take a payment is compliant, because we have our own compliance of taking card data for ourselves. You know, with what we do on the main products, we don't store anything, we don't keep anything. But you can have an accounts department that maybe if they were older people, when I first came into this business, they may have had regular people paying them, and they may have regularly stored card data in a pad. You know, you come across those things still today. We have clients that come to us with 600 branches where that was their PCI risk, was that because they were letting the people take card payments themselves, they were storing them. They thought they were compliant, but had never done a full audit.
I think there's always different levers and different pressures and different business problems. Like back in the days when people used to do stuff on tick, like taking in credit, and you might get a supplier that is giving them the credit, and then they've had the person's card in the safe, and they say, right, take it off that card at the end of the month. And it's like, at the time they were like, they wanted the business because it was so tough. We're talking some years back now, we're not talking current, but they did that because obviously it was really tight, businesses were struggling. It was also
expected, you know. I used to work in a transport company software, and that was rife for it. You know, you had the young lad would be coming in to get the parts, but it wasn't his card.
Yeah.
You know, he was using his boss's card, or his boss's card was behind the counter. That was normal 25 years ago. We've gone a long way. We've changed dramatically. Things are a lot better, but we still see people who are doing that box tick. And for us as a business, that's really hard, because when you give box tickers too much information, we can actually scare them away. You know, there are providers out there who don't do that, so we have to be a bit mindful. But you've got to do it right. I can't see any other way. There's no reason to not. Okay, so we'll put you on the spot then.
Come on,
Okay, so if a business could do 3 things today to tighten PCI compliance, what should they be?
sound understanding of the scope,
Okay, wouldn't have thought that. Okay.
well documented roles and responsibilities, internally and externally. So one thing that we've obviously touched on a lot here today is third parties.
Yeah.
But what about internally? Who's owning it?
Yeah, it's a miss, isn't it? I can see why you bring it.
100%. And I think number 3 is probably executive sponsorship, because fundamentally, if you're doing something in isolation as a business unit, and you've not got that buy-in across the business, there's always scope for stuff to go wrong, or other dependencies that may let you down.
Yeah.
But again, like, all those 3 are sort of intertwined, to be fair. Sound understanding of scope, along with the roles and responsibilities and executive sponsorship, that's the gold standard.
Yeah, it's good advice. It's not expensive stuff.
No.
You know, that goes from when we started this session today, that not understanding what their role is, not understanding what they need to do. You know, yes, it's a long set of standards to read, and as you know, I've recently done my PCI, so I know how long it is. But somebody has to own that process. If you don't want to do it yourself, that's why people like you are around. They don't need to do it themselves. If it's too much, you know, employing somebody with the kind of compliance understanding that you need is quite a high salary in a business. To bring somebody in and consultatively to do that work for you might seem expensive on a per day rate basis, but it doesn't need to be full time to fully understand it. Somebody needs to do the walk round, somebody needs to do the assessment and check how each department is doing stuff. If they don't do it themselves, they're going to have to get somebody in to do it, because that's where they leave themselves wide open, isn't it?
I think fundamentally we're independent. So
Yeah.
we're independent in the fact that we're trained and qualified by the council, and we have that organisational independence, so that for some, they want that. They want somebody to say, we've had somebody independent do this, so we're not marking our own homework.
Yeah.
And for organisations like yourselves, you can say, look, we're confident in our products, but actually somebody external's come here and validated that we are compliant. It's good peace of mind for your clients, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. This next one, as has been most of the things that you've done today, you've already answered it. But just to clarify again, so the questions that the merchant should ask their internal teams and their service providers, that's going to be for a matrix of what the third party needs to demonstrate their understanding.
Yeah, 100%. And comms is a big one.
Right.
So, like, you would rather, if you sit in a compliance team, you would rather have over-reporting than under-reporting. So if somebody's got a business initiative and they think it may involve card data, has like a line item been included there to dovetail into them to consider that they need visibility of the solution?
Yeah.
For example, so it's just getting that mindset that actually, are we going to get visibility? If they've got visibility, they can make informed decisions then.
So map and understand their processes that they're doing today internally as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there do you see in the spaces that you're operating, because I know you're in a lot of different verticals, are there blind spots that they just don't see from a technology or third party? Are there things they're unaware of to even ask or to check?
I think there's a confidence piece, and you've got to have confidence in the providers that you're working with. Just fundamentally, just because you've got a piece of paper that's an AOC, you should have that kind of relationship with your service providers that you feel confident that they're actually backing that up as well. And this comes back down to like relationship management, understanding the technology and the solution, because you should have the technical SMEs internally or even outsource. If you bring somebody in just to say, look, it could be a QSA, it could be a specialist in a certain technology or a certain area. Does this pass the sniff test? Is this actually working for us? I've seen previously, some years back, where you've had a PCI compliant provider who does similar stuff to yourself, with, and they work with a network provider, and they'd never worked in a particular industry before with a particular trading system. So it was their first implementation, and they've got a PCI compliant solution, but the actual implementation resulted in DTMF bleed.
Oh.
And that was purely down to, through like the testing procedures, just not having worked with it before. So on paper we've got something that's compliant, but had they not gone through the testing and the rigor and the deep understanding of how the technology worked, that wouldn't have been found. And obviously this provider, they quickly jumped on it, got it fixed, and like embraced it and sorted it. But I suppose that then demonstrated the confidence in them that they're not just ticking the box on their side.
No, you've got to, and you are watching for it. You know,
of course.
Because you are working with so many, crikey, we must work with a dozen or so network providers, probably 25, 30 telephony, and most of them think they're tier one, not, but you've got that plethora, which gives you such a diverse interface, understanding, and crossover networks. The amount of providers. This is our bit of kit, but actually, the contact centre's over here, and that plugs in over to them. You're like, I didn't even know that was here, and it's the bits that you don't know that you don't know that makes it difficult for us. Okay, let's see. Is there anything? Is there any? So as it was myths, and we were busting myths. Is there any sort of one myth that you see in your work that you wish it would stop being repeated or stop happening?
You don't get PCI compliance out of a cereal packet. It's not a free toy. So even if you fully outsource something,
right,
you've still got to understand what requirements are yours to manage. Even if as a minimum it's incident response. So if something goes wrong, like what's on the merchant, what's on the service provider, usually should be whoever sees it first sticks their hands up and goes, right, we've got a problem. But you've also got to manage that service provider. So even as little as understand their responsibilities, maintaining a written agreement, if there's any changes, etc., keeping on top of that and understanding your scope, etc.
Sounds like a lot of work doing it.
Well, no, I think no, but even that, but it's not just a case of right. We've got the AOC once and that's it. It's still right. We've still got to manage that service provider and keep that going.
So it's like an MOT.
But basically,
it's only valid in that 45-minute window. As soon as I drive out the garage, if the car has something wrong with it, and I don't maintain it and keep a check on it, it doesn't mean that it's not worth the paper it's printed on, is it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's right. We've got this compliant solution, but then if somebody else in another department suddenly starts taking calls manually and punching card data in, it's completely circumvented 100%. The whole process and undermined what you've tried to achieve.
Yeah, we had a hospital charity who somebody overrode all of their handheld terminals had the ability to take manual payment removed, as you would expect. Because they didn't want to use, they bought a system to do it properly from us. Somebody overlaid all their terminals and reset all of their configs, and because their terminals were no longer a compliance risk, they didn't have them in their audit to check. Nobody thought to check, and it was like 6 months in that they discovered that all of a sudden, we'd let them know, so your payment ratios are down. There seems to be a drop in, is there something wrong? Is there a problem in the system? And it was only through working with them on that communication to say, 4 months running, this is still down. There's something not right. They then went and did an audit and found that somebody had done an overlay, and the people had just started doing it the way they did it before. Because it must be fine because it works now.
But I think this is, if we sort of pull on that thread a little bit there and go, right, we'll sort of do like a quick root cause analysis of that, you can go straight away, well, there was a change that was possibly planned, possibly not planned. Was it documented? Did anyone
That's a good question.
Did anyone do a risk assessment on it from a compliance standpoint or data protection standpoint? Because had all those things been done at the start,
it would never have happened.
It wouldn't have happened.
No, so it's a tardiness of process, really.
Yeah.
Some people take it really, really to heart and follow stuff properly. It comes back to what we've said all along. It's a tick box or doing it for the right reasons.
I think there's times as well where people are genuinely doing the best to try and solve a business problem or work efficiently. And if those processes aren't in place and people have a lot of freedom, like they just generally think, well, I'm just going to crack on and do it. And it's the comms piece where people don't understand then until 6 months later and you're flagging it up, the transactions are down. Why is this happening?
Yeah, madness. Okay, so look, we've said people can come to you guys, but if they should already know where to go and get the most up-to-date compliance information, but where would you recommend they go to find out what they need to do?
Well, speak to us if you're unsure. So have a look online at LRQA.com or give us a call. Or equally, if you feel like you do have a bit of a start point, always look to the council's website, the PCI SSC. In there, there's lots of relevant documentation and guidance documents as well, so especially around some technical nuances. Okay. But again, as some of the documentation in there is quite old, and quite heavy. I would say, like, take it with a pinch of salt, have a read and digest, and then come to us, because there might be more current advice that's circulating.
It's certainly much easier talking to somebody who knows what they're doing than trying to find it yourself, especially if it's not your core thing.
No.
You know, if you're not the compliance person, but you know it needs to be, get some help. Don't try and do it yourself. It's too much like hard work. Okay, well, look, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming over.
Cheers, Mark. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good.